Welcome back to Voices of Government IT, Achieving Enterprise-Wide Cloud Adoption, sponsored by Unisys here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. Our guests today are Lakshmi Ashok. She's the CTO for Homeland and Critical Infrastructure at Unisys Federal. David Levy is Vice President for U.S. Government at Amazon Web Services, and Peter O'Donohue, Vice President of Application Services at Unisys Federal. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And we talked about some of the goodies from cloud computing in the first segment. Let's talk about some of the challenges, the common challenges you see across agencies in adopting cloud. Peter, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So one of the things that we found is cloud, there are immense opportunities to serve the stakeholders of government more effectively with cloud. But we see that there's a lot of things that need to happen in order to be able to kind of reach nirvana. And some of them have to do with kind of mechanical, kind of maybe not as sexy things. So some of the programmatic issues. So we find, oftentimes agencies need to kind of rethink their procurement approach or acquisition approach. So how do I set a contract together so that I can deal with the amount of innovation, the sheer number of service catalog items that you have on the major cloud providers can be a huge issue for federal customers. We find that actually we talked about one of the key issues and one of the key reasons that folks move to the cloud is related to financials. Oftentimes, the very same agencies who want to move to the cloud actually don't really understand what their current spend is. So they don't really have that visibility. So oftentimes you need to understand how to quantify what the business case is, how to put together incentives together in order to be able to make that case. And we also have the new kind of standard of TBM being implemented as well. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into making the business case.
And TBM applies in the cloud just as much as in your own data center.
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely. And then we see, there's this question of like, what is the roadmap? What does a playbook look like in terms of what do I need to do with my assessments and how do I plan for it? How do I kind of plan for what I need to do with my folks, my training, my governance processes? That all needs to be put together and needs to be implemented, and actually need to have a contracting and acquisition strategy that maps up to that. And then we talked about a lock-in a little bit. Like sometimes, I believe that lock-in happens no matter where. It's choosing where you want to lock in, and actually there's a lot of times there's really good reasons as to which cloud provider. Actually, in some of our major civilian accounts, for example, we actually have put together matrices and decision kind of trees that help you say, okay, for this type of workload, you're going to move it to AWS. For this type of workload, maybe not so much. We'll keep it on-prem or we'll put it to another cloud provider. So actually having support for agencies as they're going to go through those journeys and helping them put their larger enterprise roadmap together is critically important. Because otherwise, without those big things being done, we see folks kind of getting stuck and wanting to move to the cloud and getting frustrated sometimes.
It sounds like even though you may not want lock-in, you should plan for a long-term engagement if you're going to get the most benefit.
That's right. Well, actually, truthfully, anytime you make a decision, you've locked into something.
Sure.
It's choosing where you're locking in is really the question.
And what are some of the people issues? Because there are cultural issues, especially when you're taking someone's data center and throwing it up into the cloud.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think what we've seen, the difference between agencies and customers that talk about doing it and the ones that actually do something and get it done is really at the top. It's leadership. And what we see is leadership sets aggressive goals for the organization around their objectives and drives the organization to make those changes and holds people accountable. Without that leadership, all the other things that kind of flow under that, whether it's upskilling or learning security or governance, really happen at varying degrees. So in our view, it takes really strong leadership from the top at an agency to make this happen. And then you can start to build the people issues that you need around organizational change and really putting a plan together that can help skill the right people, bring in the right partner to pull off an effort transition to cloud.
What about that IT person who may have gone back to the mini computer days and they're used to having servers brought in and plugging them in and winding up the tapes, so to speak.
Well, I used to be one of those people, so I can certainly understand that. I think cloud presents such a huge opportunity for all of us in this industry. There are so many new technologies, and regardless of the platform, I think the ability to get new skills is out there. And so There are so many different things you could get into, from serverless to containers to new world databases, new security models. So I would say for those IT professionals, the sky is really the limit.
Lakshmi?
Yeah, I was just going to add that changing the mindset is also critical. So yes, we definitely need leadership. We need sponsorship from the leaders. But changing the mindset of the people is equally important. I'll give you a little example. So one of the very first cloud implementations that we did, we had an SLA to spin up a server within 4 hours. Of course, we met it in minutes, but we had to do a change order. We had to go through a CCB, change control board, and that took 2 weeks. So just imagine that using cloud in such a situation was really not necessary, right? So we needed to change the mindset of the people so that they did not have to go through the same CCB process, because it really wasn't necessary for something like cloud.
And when you mention CCB process, that gets to the idea of governance. And that's always an issue. And a lot of times you hear feds talk about the authority to operate and how that maps over to cloud. What are your thoughts there?
I think I'll speak to you about technical governance for a bit. Technical governance, some of the challenges that we're facing from a governance perspective with the customers that I have is they have these old monolith applications, of course, right? Where they have null code, they don't know the code is tied to the hardware. There's so many interdependencies between databases. So how do they even begin to get out of there to rethink their data architecture that can be federated, that can be accurate, that can be leveraged across? That's just one part. Then how do they start breaking that code to use little modules like microservices? This is the other thing they need help with. So they definitely need to start looking. That's their area of challenge from a technical perspective.
Yeah, so the governance kind of maps over right to the technical.
Yes, absolutely.
That idea of where the applications are tied directly to the hardware, that's more common than people understand, I think, sometimes in government.
It's very common. Not to go too nerdy on you, but we had to start looking at how do we deal with sticky sessions when we were moving some piece of code over to cloud a couple of months ago.
And all the interdependencies start to pop up that might have been buried in the goo for a long time.
Yes.
All right, on that happy note, we'll take a short break here. This is Voices of Government IT, Achieving Enterprise-Wide Cloud Adoption, sponsored by Unisys, here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.